Thursday, June 17th. I am your host, Chris Solano. This is the Everyday Throwing Show in conjunction with the Take It Deep podcast. I am joined, as always, by the throwing experts, California Jim Vatcher, president of Jager Sports, as well as Alex Trezor, Virgil Vasquez, co-founders of Revolution Throwing. We are here, as always, to talk everything throwing, everything in the sport of baseball, all the things we love. Thanks for tuning in. I want to get right into this, guys. I trust all as well. As we move forward here into the summer, where it's really getting to that time, for me anyway, where you really start missing baseball if you don't see it, and if you don't have it. Technically, we should be, less than a month away from the All-Star break, if you look at the calendar, in the normal year, and we have yet to even throw a pitch in the big leagues. So the one thing I wanted to start with was going without baseball, talking about something in my life that drew me back to the game. Not that I ever went away at all, but just really heightened everybody's awareness of Major League Baseball and brought the masses back, was 1998. Now, ESPN just did a 30 for 30 called Long Gone Summer, with the details being around Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa having their home run race, which eventually overtook Roger Maris's record. So we understand the importance of records in baseball. We understand especially that home run record. I feel like if you ask the average person who leads, who all-time hit the most home runs, who hit the most home runs in a season, they'll probably answer that quicker or more efficiently than, let's just say, who scored the most career touchdowns or who scored the most points in NBA history. So I think that those records, and especially the home run record, is something very special. So this documentary brought me back to that time in 98 when it took the world by storm. I remember watching ESPN during those times, and no matter what was on, McGwire and Sosa came to the plate, and they would cut away right to the at-bat of those two guys. The at-bat would come and go, and then they go right back to programming as is. You just don't see that anymore in our sport, all right? Now, for whatever reason, you don't. There's a lot of people that argue that popularity-wise, and if you go by the data, the NBA and the NFL has surpassed Major League Baseball. But for that point, in 1998, you couldn't get away from it. It didn't matter if you were a Cubs fan and a Cardinals fan. It didn't matter if you didn't even like baseball. You could not escape what was going on with McGwire, Sosa, and that race. I remember 1994, my senior year of high school. The player strike happens, and they lost roughly 50 games of the regular season at the end, plus the entire postseason went away overnight, which was a complete shock to everyone that was involved and a complete shock to all fans. I remember being a little more upset than the average. The Yankees at the time were one of the two best teams in Major League Baseball, which hurt for me because it was a drought. The Yankees, all these young kids are so used to the Yankees being who they are. I remember the Yankees a completely different thing, where you could just walk into a game because nobody was there, and you could go to opening day without getting tickets in advance and all those things. The Montreal Expos were the other quote-unquote best team that year. Now think about that. The Expos probably pound for pound had the best team on paper if you look back. And it would have been fun to see if the Yankees and Expos would have made it there at the end. But talk about a team that never sniffed it after that. It was the Expos. And now they don't even exist, technically. So 94 brought the strike. A lot of people just took off and never came back to the game in terms of the average fan because of just that. The game went away. They either figured out they didn't miss it or they had that bitter taste in their mouth. Bring 1998 into the fold, and like I said, this thing sweeps the entire country as the assault on that record became a real thing. Now, Jim, I'll start with you. You were obviously playing, and I'm not sure, were you in the country playing? Were you overseas? Were you in the big leagues? Where were you that 98 season?
Yeah, I remember it vividly. I was in Taiwan playing my second season in Taiwan, and I remember being up at 3, 4, 5 in the morning watching a Cardinals game, because I was caught up in it. And I remember seeing, I think McGwire was right around mid-60s with his home run, somewhere in the 60s, and he hit a ball that went out. that was called a double. And I remember, and they didn't have the instant replay back then, and I was going crazy. I was like, no, what are you doing? And I think he had already hit one earlier in the game. This would have been a second one. And it was clearly a home run. They called it a double. I tried to find it on the internet just recently, just out of curiosity. I couldn't find it. But it didn't matter. He got the record, at least for that year, and he got a nice round number of 70. But I remember it was pretty crazy to see one go out and be called a double at that point. But it was I rarely watch regular season games. Like, I watch playoff games. I like watching that. So for me to be up at 5 a.m. watching a regular season Cardinals game, growing up in LA, being a Dodger fan, was I was totally caught up in it. It was pretty special. It never crossed my mind, steroids at the time, for whatever reason. It was just, I was caught up in the magic of it. Two guys having epic seasons and fighting it out to the end and seeing where they were going to end up.
And I think that, and I guess this is a good question for you. Did you come across either of those guys in your career, whether it was playing against, or in the minor leagues even at all? Did you ever cross paths with either? And if you did, what did you think? Did you think, everybody kind of thought McGwire was going to be kind of that, right? That low average hitter, but a guy that could potentially hit 50 a year. He did it his first year in the bigs. And then there was him and the Bash Brothers thing goes away, which is crazy to me because that's how I knew him and remembered him, with him and Canseco on the A's. It seems like a distant memory once his Cardinals career started and you got a glimpse of that whole thing. And then the crazy part, just to end it, he was out of baseball, I think it was 2 to 3 years after that season, gone completely as a player. Which, did you come across either Sosa or McGwire at all?
I don't remember coming across them. Our hitting coach at the Padres, Merv Retman, was the hitting coach for the A's, and he was telling stories. They had to cut during batting practice the cage that comes over home plate. They had to cut that thing in half because McGwire and Canseco would hit balls straight up that would hit that cage that for most hitters like myself would be a pop-up to the shortstop. Those balls were going out of the stadium for them or going over the fences for them. So they had to literally adjust the batting cage for both those guys. And I did play against Canseco in spring training, which I told you on a previous thing. And I was playing right field, and he swung so hard, he buckled my knees in right field when I was playing right field. And that was pretty special. That was that would have been 91. So he's, in his prime of his career. And so I'd never seen a guy swing a bat that hard. And inside, secretly, I was praying for him to get a hold of one. I didn't want to root against my own pitcher, but I was like, please get a hold of one. I want to see this ball fly. But, I played with Jeremy Burnitz, who was a home run hitter for the Mets and mostly the Milwaukee Brewers. And he said that, and Burnitz had big time power. And so he would say, he would brag about how far he was hitting balls. And he would say, oh my God, I went out to see McGwire take batting practice, and he made my hits look like a little league. I look like a little league player with how far these balls are going. And anybody that I talk to about McGwire hitting balls, the 500 and some, they're like, these things have to be going farther than that. They've never seen balls go as far as what he was hitting them. So I just wish I saw it. I never did, unfortunately.
Before we get back to McGwire and Sosa, Alex, we got to talk. Whenever we bring up Jose Canseco, I know that you have some Jose Canseco experience. Give us a quick rundown of how that whole thing came about. You obviously experienced Canseco at the polar opposite end of when Jimmy saw him. But give us your whole Jose Canseco experience, if you can, as quickly as you can.
Yeah, so we played together in independent ball, way after all this happened. And it was with the Worcester Tornadoes. I was actually coaching with you, Chris, and that was in the summer. He hit third, and I hit fourth. And I led off every second inning of the whole year until he didn't play anymore, because I don't think he hit a ball. He was really interesting, man. He had biker gloves on, the leather gloves with the holes out of the knuckles. He used to take BP with those. and he literally, like, he had no undershirt on. He used to wear his he wore his shin guard under his pants, not over his pants. And he used to put everything on at about, I don't know, 3 o'clock, like before we went out for BP. He was in full uni, ready to go. And he had this really weird routine where we would go in the cage, and he would have whoever was throwing or flipping would have to throw overhand from about 8 feet away and as hard as you could. And all his goal was to try to just make contact and hit it directly into the ground, pull side. And we were like, what? I don't understand what that means. He was like, no, if I can get to that and I can get pull side, that means I'll stay through it. And we were a little bit confused about it. But it's Conseco's here. Like, yeah, whatever, dude. I'll throw it as hard as I can. And we would literally throw like 20 balls in a row, and he'd miss every single one. And be like, yeah, I'm ready. And it was funny. It was really weird being on deck with him walking up to the plate and then just taking, like Jim was saying, like gangster hacks. He swung really, really hard. And he was older at the time, and he used like a 35-35 or 36-36. I mean, it was a monster bat. And I think he struck out 19 out of 20 times to start the season. And then he was like going and picking up everyone bat like a 34-32, like trying to use it. He was definitely a character. He was a good dude, but he was just he was trying to hit as far as he could. He didn't care about anything else. It was really funny, actually.
Had to bring it up. Jose Canseco comes up. We got to tell some stories. I know you had, obviously, with Jimmy seeing him on one end, you seeing him on the back end. We had to kind of connect the two. So
he was cool. He was a good dude. It was just funny. He was just, he was a cartoon character, and we used to ask him all these questions, and it was really fun. We had some good stories, no doubt about that.
So going back to what we were discussing, Virgil, do you remember or anything at all about that whole home run race, being a little bit younger, in 1998? Where were you? Do you remember the race itself, and remember any of the things we're describing? Like I said, the presence of it was everywhere from what I remember. What were your memories of it?
Yeah, well, I grew up a Cardinals fan because my mom's from St. Louis, so we were just all about it. We were just watching it, following it. I just remember a few things that I remember. I remember watching McGwire hit. I remember his forearms being this monster, and I remember him hitting homers that wouldn't go much higher than this. It was the hardest balls hit that I've ever seen. I just remember him just crushing balls, just and he didn't look fluid. It just looked like he had power, So you watch other guys and they have fluidity and they have good strokes, and he was see ball, hit ball, yeah, I'm going to get you. And I just remember just following it. And then there was this thing we had to do online. We signed up for this contest, and you had to guess how many homers. He was around the 40 mark, and you're like, how many do you think he's going to get? And I guessed 70. I never got my prize. I was like, where's my prize? I got supposed to get a prize here. I remember telling my mom that. But I, sophomore in high school, St. Louis Cardinals fan with my mom, and just enjoying the game then, because I was really excited to see him and Sosa back and forth, chasing that record.
And what you said is true. I watched the documentary, brought it back into my mind. And Jim, you could talk about this as a hitter. His swing was super compact for a guy that was a big power, hitter. And that just goes, his natural strength was obviously immense. But it's exactly right what Virgil said. It's see ball, hit ball, and just attack. It's almost like he didn't have a trigger. He didn't have any real timing. It was almost a still bat right to the ball. And he hit balls. They showed 4 or 5 home runs that even I knew they were showing home run clips. He would hit a ball at the left field. And I go, all right, well, that's a double. And the ball is over the wall. Talk a little bit about his swing, if you remember. Again, I saw nothing kind of triggering back as much as normally you would. It was just right to the ball and gone. And again, that shows you the natural power. His forearms were the size of most guys' thighs. Let's be realistic. But do you remember anything about that swing?
Yeah, he kind of crouched down a little bit, and it looked like you said, there wasn't a whole lot of movement. It just looked like he exploded from his hands were fairly low, and then he just exploded straight up. And that's kind of nice. You know, I always had to pattern my swing to keep the ball out of the air, because and unless we were in Italy, Chris, then I swung a little more up. But the parts were a little smaller there. But that's I was trying to keep the ball out of the air. He is trying to hit every single ball in the air, which is pretty much what guys are trying to do now, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're trying to get every ball up in the air. And it's pretty nice when you can really, he could miss-hit a ball pretty significantly, and it's still going over the fence. You know, because when you're hitting at 500 feet and you miss-hit it pretty bad and only goes 350 and it goes over the fence, that'd be pretty nice to have all those lazy fly balls go out as home runs, you know. But yeah, he was pretty disciplined. I mean, he became a very good hitter. He was disciplined. He didn't strike out as much during that time, and he had a good eye at the plate. He took his walks if he needed to, but very, very little movement, just straight up explosion. And I saw him, I was just looking at some of his stuff the other day. I saw him get a hold of Billy Wagner's fastball. I know you like Billy Wagner, which I did too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he won a game against him and hit a ball halfway up the top tier at St. Louis. I'm like, how is a ball going into the top tier at St. Louis? It didn't even look right. You know, I'm surprised they don't have that seat marked off differently or something. You know, a fan got a souvenir, game-winning home run, sitting in a spot where the players look like ants, you know, and they're getting a souvenir home run. It's pretty wild.
I remember the exact pitch, and it was 99. So that shows you bat speed too. It was 99, and yeah, it disappeared. It completely disappeared. It reminds me actually, and I don't know if it's because it's the same stadium or the same team. It reminds me what Pujols does. You know, he hits that same home run that I always just say the ball just disappeared. Like it's not a ball anymore. It's gone. And that was kind of that same swing. Alex, as a guy that is now obviously on the pitching end of things professionally, but you made your money as a player by hitting the ball over the fence from the left side every time you could. What did you see in this swing? Was it similar? As Jimmy said, I mean, in terms of, I think he might have almost pioneered the launch angle if you think about it. Although you could talk about Ted Williams, who always said nobody should be swinging down. You should all be swinging up. We could have a whole episode on Ted Williams, but what were your observations, if any, when you watch McGwire?
Yeah, I remember it like yesterday. I mean, it was amazing to watch those two guys do what they do like every night. It was just like, I couldn't wait to put on SportsCenter and see what was going on. But I remember specifically kind of really about both of them is like plate coverage. You know, if it was around the plate, I mean, they can get extension and get it in the air, and I had a chance to get out of the ballpark. And I remember before, you know, McGwire was with the Cardinals when he was still playing with the A's, and like, I remember these epic battles with like Mariano and him when he was with the A's, and like bottom in the ninth, and it like you knew he was going to throw a fastball, and you knew McGwire was going to swing as hard as he could, and it was just like these epic battles, and it was just like power on power, and like, he kept doing it, and it was just I don't know, it was fun to watch. I mean, it was like that's the thing. It was like a heavyweight battle between the pitcher and him, and you know, obviously like he won most of the time. So, but to watch him and Sosa do what they did, like, you know, remember Sosa running out with the American flag when he ran out to the field and stuff. It was just such a great time for baseball, and it was almost like the WWE or WWF at the time, right? It was just like it was a media event. It was like a Broadway show. Like you couldn't wait to see what happened. So, but I remember plate coverage, and just if you made a mistake, he was probably going to get you. And like Jim was saying, like even if he missed it, like he probably had a good chance to kind of hurt you pretty bad.
And bringing up Sosa, we haven't really just touched on him. He became more of the theatrical one of the two. Like you said, sprinting out to right field. I think Wrigley Field allows for that too. If you play up, you know, to the crowd there and you're successful and you're their guy, you can make a pretty big spectacle there. And he also delivered, let's be honest. But I remember Sosa, he had more of that bat whip. He had more, probably few more moving parts than McGwire, just from my observation. But I remember him hitting balls that were down and away all the way through the bleachers in right field, not to them, like through the bleachers. Like the ball would just hovercraft up the bleachers through the back of the net and like disappear into Chicago. And I used to think like, okay, so at what point do you start saying to yourself, and Virgil, you could talk to this on the pro level as a pitcher. At what point do you start just saying to yourself, okay, there's really nowhere I can pitch this guy? If it gets down to it, what do you do? I mean, obviously a base open, you don't want him to beat you, things like that. But where do you go? If I've seen him hit every single pitch in every single spot through the outfield wall, off the reservation, or through the bleachers. God bless him, but what do you do? Maybe has anyone you've ever faced brought that to your mind? Whether in the big leagues, college, pro ball, at any level, has there ever been a guy like that you faced that those thoughts came into your head?
Yeah, I had the toughest time with the hitters. I couldn't figure out their swing. I don't know what it was when I was pitching. Like Matsui took me deep, Fukudomi took me deep. All these guys, they just took me. I couldn't figure them out. But the count. I say the score dictates if I'm really gonna come after you. But when those guys come up, the Sammy Sosas, these guys, these wheel horse, these like the studs in the lineup, you want to see how good you are. You're gonna go after them. If the game allows you to, like that's where it's like, all right, let's go. I'm gonna bring you my stuff. But you're also smart in the sense as a starting pitcher where you're okay, or a reliever. This is where the situation's at. This is what's going on. I'm not gonna try right here. Well, I'm gonna try, but I'm gonna lean in the favor of me because I'm not gonna let you beat us. But when it's go time, like when we have rehab guys in the minor leagues, I always tell our minor league pitchers, like, now you get to show off. Like, don't be afraid of this guy. Go. That's the one guy in the lineup you're gonna show off against, because now you get the test to see if you're good. Like you get to like go after him, like see how good you really are. Get in the zone, and don't get timid and pitch around the zone. But those Japanese swings, man, I couldn't figure them out. I want another shot.
Maybe that.
I want another.
Do you have any idea what that was? Was it their maybe those guys didn't try to do too much, or was it something philosophical with their approach? Do you think?
I just had never faced them before, and like the pause, they get up in the pause, and then the go, or like I don't know, there's the whole thing, the way they stood in the box, the swing path. I wasn't used to it. I hadn't had a lot of practice against it. But when I get to the major leagues and then I got to face these guys, especially as good as they were, it's just like, I guess it kind of got in my head too. If we think about the mental side of the game, like I wasn't prepared enough to, how do I do this? Where do I go? And video wasn't as prevalent back then. So I didn't have as much video as well. So I think I changed now, but back then, man, I couldn't get them out. I couldn't do it.
Jimmy, on the other side of that, you having experience in Taiwan, playing for a long stretch, just as we get on this topic, as a hitter, what were the biggest differences coming from the big league level in the U.S., going overseas and facing predominantly, I assume, Taiwanese pitchers, so probably a few American guys mixed in, I would assume. But what was the biggest difference? I mean, I guess overall velocity was probably a thing. I'll let you answer. But other than that, what was the biggest adjustment you had to make, if any?
I think you're just not on the same wavelength. You're used to reading American pitchers and maybe getting on the same wavelength and guessing with them. There's a guessing game as a hitter and a pitcher. And maybe that's what Virgil had a little bit, where he's thinking of the guys that he's faced in the States or American hitters, and they're thinking a little differently. And a lot of those hitters, and I saw them do it to the American pitchers over there, a lot of them are flat through the zone, and they're just trying to go the other way. They're not trying to do too much. And so they're pesky. And as a pitcher, you really don't like facing those guys. You rather face the big home run hitter, that has some holes in his swing. And if you execute pitches, you don't want to face guys that are fouling a lot of pitches off. And these guys fouled a lot of pitches off. They were disciplined. They weren't trying to do too much. And they would frustrate the heck out of our American pitchers, I remember. Because we would overpower them a lot, but they would find a way maybe to get on base and really frustrate some guys. But for me, Yeah, sometimes I was looking for a certain pitch, and they would throw me a stupid pitch, and not that they're stupid at all. They're great. They have great pitchers over there, but it would be like, oh man, if he threw me the pitch I was looking for, I would have been all over that. And so sometimes you just have to figure out the different the wavelength, and it takes a little while. And then after that, baseball is pretty much baseball, and you have to, it's see the ball and hit the ball. But yeah, it's just a little different mentality.
I agree with you. I felt as a pitcher, and I preach this to the guys I coach now, if we find a guy that we can use their aggressiveness against them, it's going to make it a lot easier if we can fight that battle. And I think that a lot of hitters don't think about that, especially at the lower levels, where if I see you as a guy that's going to come up there and look for a certain pitch or any pitch for that matter, with that ultra aggressive approach, to me, it kind of writes the story. I know what we're going to do if we go after you. I know if I was pitching personally what I'm going to do. It's those guys that do stay disciplined and stay in an approach that is almost non-aggressive that are essentially the hardest ones to face, right? And especially, Al, you being a hitter and a catcher and calling games, I would think those big swinging guys, in my opinion, and when I coach against them now, again, to me, it's fairly simple on what we need to do to execute to get those guys. And that story really doesn't change much to me. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the guys that are a little bit less aggressive, they're in the zone a long time. It just like they're pesky, like Jimmy said again, like those guys are annoying. It's almost like just throw them something over the plate, let them get on base or get out and like get on with it. Let's not waste 10 pitches on this guy. Like, especially at the college level, like a lot of our guys waste 20 pitches, like, and 2 at bats off a guy and that hits 8th or 9th. And I'm like, just let him get on or let him get out. Like, you want to save those pitches, but those guys are annoying. The guys that have the big swing and have the holes, it's like, let's attack those things. They're going to miss a lot. But it's a cat and mouse game sometimes. There's, one thing at the college level is the hitters and the pitchers a lot of times are products of the coach. So like if the coach is preaching, hey, when there's a guy on second base, like we're going to sit breaking ball, like that's not the hitter's like psyche getting into place or like his mental approach. It's the coach's approach. So like when I could figure out what the coach is preaching to his hitters, it helps me call a game. And the same thing on the pitcher side, I said, let's figure out what their pitching coach likes to do with their pitchers, for our hitters. Once we figure that out, then it doesn't matter what the pitcher has. Like you can, now go into your bats based on what you think the pitching coach is going to call. So it's a little different at the college level, but again, it's about figuring out what the tendency is and what guys want to do.
We're gonna kind of move forward into now. We'll end with some draft stuff as we go post draft. Our last show was centered mainly on the Major League Baseball draft, and there's some things to talk about. But before we get to that, we all coach athletes in some shape or form here. Virgil, you at the professional level. Alex and I are both in college. Jimmy, with your business and your I do believe you're also coaching Little League, quote unquote, Little League baseball, youth baseball, which is great because it's still pretty pure at that level and reminds you why you love the game. We've all had this reset. We've all had this time off. We've all had time to, which I'm sure if you're like the 4 of us, to kind of look at some different things and research and keep trying to get better, even though we can't do it on the field. And I started to think about, as I go down the road of hopefully getting back into this the way I'm used to, are there things I'm going to add that I wasn't before I had this time? Are there things I'm going to remove from some of my ideas? Are there things that, I may stop doing for whatever reason? And I was just curious if any of you guys had anything that has come your way. And shows like this, a lot of times are for that reason. We've done a great deal of talking about what we do pregame and what we do to get ourselves ready, like using the products that all of you guys have created. Are there other things in general, and you don't have to go into much detail, but are there things that you guys have come across or thought about that maybe you've changed your perspective on? For me personally, I've been doing a lot of thinking about, because I had a chance to actually sit down and think for an extended period of time. because unfortunately, I think we get into our seasons, we get into the cycle of the season, and yeah, I may have an off day, but realistically, am I going to sit down and think about, can I change, make a huge overhaul, or quite frankly, do I have the time to at this point in the year, or it's just few and far between. So I've had this time. I've really looked into flat ground things and how we do those things, and if I think it's useful, if I don't think it's useful, how I want to keep doing it. So that's one thing I've been looking at to try to help get my guys better. But anything that you guys have really looked at from a throwing perspective over this time that you feel like you may bring to the table, or something you may even ease back on, not because you don't think it's good, but maybe it's just you change your thinking a little bit. Is anybody experiencing that at all?
I'll go first. Some things like that I'm seeing, I guess it's just being more like foundation is this inside 90 and how effective it really is, because I've been doing some online training, and guys will come back after 2 days and be like, oh, I already feel better. So, it's like this reinforcement that, that we're moving in the right direction with delivery and with throwing mechanics, and that like as a sport, like we're figuring out where health comes from, and we're coming up with things that work. I would say another thing that it's developing for me is the relationships with my players, so that now, like when I go back, I'll have, we spend 30 minutes on Zoom once a week of just talking about life, or, and it's this removal of, hey, you guys have had baseball for a couple of months. What have you guys been doing? How are your habits now? Like, what's been going on? How's the girlfriend? And these like relationships have deepened. So I think that'll help. I haven't really, I guess one other thing I'm learning is, and we talk about preparation, is just game preparation. So how are we going to attack this hitter? One thing we're learning, I'll give a little golden nugget about like walk percentage and strikeout percentage, and how these correlate to what a hitter's telling us. So walk percentage is correlated to chase rate. So if they have a high walk rate, it means they have a low chase rate. So that it can give you a glimpse on where to look farther on how you're going to face a hitter. And then a strikeout rate talks about swing and miss. So if you have a high strikeout and a high walk rate, it means they're swinging and missing in the zone. And if you have a high strikeout rate and a low walk rate, then it means they're chasing a lot. And so you can expand. So learning things like this that I can bring to the table.
And I think one of the things you said that's ultra important is it's giving you time to establish that off the field relationship, because it's all you really have right now. And I think that that's probably something that, and at your level, guys can pretty much come and go fairly quickly, I would assume, getting called up. Even if you have them for 1 year, I'm sure you don't always get guys back. So you really do have a small window with a lot of guys. So I guess this, like you said, kind of reinforces that relationship, which is something I never thought of for guys at the pro level, which I think is great. If we shift to you, Jimmy, you and Alan work with guys at various levels, various ages, various places in their careers. Have you guys talked or discussed at all, or even in your own personal coaching? I'm fairly certain you're coaching, your sons, you're coaching youth. Has anything surfaced with you to kind of, with this time off, to think about and see that you may use moving forward or may get rid of moving forward?
Well, I think real simply, just taking coaching from the Little League level, my main goal with these kids is to have fun. I want them to have a good experience. When they leave my team, I want them to have good memories of their Little League experience. And when they think back on it 20, 30, 40 years later in their life, I want them to have fond memories of their Little League experience. That just heightens this for me. This whole thing just heightens this for me. So it's so pure at this level. It's like they haven't had baseball in so long. They've been totally deprived. I want it to be kind of like Sandlot baseball, as if these kids were showing up, what they would do if there was no adults around, no coaches. They would have fun. They would play what position they wanted. And so I'm going to be a little more aware of that If a kid wants to play a certain position, he wants to pitch, and he's ready to do it, you're in. You're in. You got 20 pitches right now, but or 1 inning, whatever. But you're gonna pitch. You want to pitch. This is your time. I've already had my career. This is your time. You want to have fun. It is zero about winning. I mean, look, if every team's going to make the playoffs, if we have a playoffs, I'll try to win for the 2 to 3 games there. But leading up into that point, it's all about fun. These kids haven't had baseball in the longest time. I'm going to remember this probably for the rest of the time I coach. How badly I just want to be out there and watch them play. I don't want there to be any stress. I don't want there to be any anxiety playing. There's no pressure from me. Just go out and have fun. So that's the main thing I've been thinking about is just, it's a little different for you guys, a lot different. But for me, it's a little similar for you guys. I mean, you got to have fun too. But for me, just I want them to be pure enjoyment for them.
So, in speaking on what Jim said, Alex, you and I are in similar situations in terms of our level. You're in even a more, the reality is, in a more pressure-packed level than I am. That being said, we need to win to have jobs and further our careers. Is there something that, and it's probably along the lines of, what you want to implement with your guys moving forward? I know that since we started this, I've been watching video on my guys, and now I'm just looking at arm path. Like, I'm just looking at that around the clock now, and I'm like, I'm almost have to pull myself back. Like, I'm starting to write stuff down and say, all right, I'm going to overhaul this entire guy's, life because I have this time, and now I'm learning all these things from you and Virgil, and obviously Jim, and I'm like, all right, well, I got to talk to this guy. And then I'm like, wait a minute, just take a step back here. And but that being said, it does crack the door open for me to explore. And to me, that's the important part. Explore it and see what works and see what can be helpful and get better. For us, Al, I think we have to first figure out when the heck, our seasons are going to kind of take shape and kind of go back from day one. We always work in reverse, right? So, and Virgil, I'm sure it's the same with you. You're working from the day you pitch all the way back. So for me, my number one is going to throw on February 25th. I work from the 25th back to September, whatever, when we start in the fall. Is there anything you have seen or thought about? And we're always talking about things we want to learn and know about. I've recently joined also the Rapsodo Club, purchased one. Our program purchased one. I fought it for a little while and said that I didn't think it was important and said I had no use for it. And then one day I saw how you can literally break down frame by frame where guys' hand positions are on all their pitches. And I was locked in. Like, that to me blows my mind. Like, I want to see that stuff. Forget the velocity for a second, spin rate, all those things. And Al, you had a conversation with me probably 6 months ago, maybe longer, and said, hey, we either buy into the stuff and learn it because it's going to get used no matter what. So you might as well just dive in. And you were 100% right. So to me, what's coming your way? I've given you a long-winded question here, but what's coming the way of the BC baseball program? Anything that's come, your way during this?
Yeah, you're talking about relationships with guys. I mean, I speak to guys. It's crazy, but probably more than I would normally speak to guys on an individual basis during the season, just because, kind of the season lends itself to that. Like, it's so crazy with travel and everything like that. So that relationship, you're finding out more about guys. One thing I'm really finding out about guys is how much they want to explore, how they can get better, right? They're playing with different grips, or, I'm playing with this cutter today, it's so nasty, or like, I was throwing this breaking ball we were working on, all last year, and like I just scrapped it. Like, I realize what you're talking about. Like, let's just throw the slider now, or whatever it may be. And then really like finding out what, who the guys are that really, really love baseball. The guys that are, making up different drills they can do for themselves with command, or they're like, I made this drill up and I really feel my back hip load better, or my arm path work better. So there's certain guys that are just like just searching for ways to get better on a daily basis in their backyard or with their dad or something like that. So that's been really fun for me. And then one thing I've been really thinking about is just like, and it's always in the back of my mind, but we've had a lot of time for guys to just be athletic. Go ground balls, like, I'm getting stale with it. I'm like, go take 100 ground balls at shortstop today, and just, remember how you feel throwing across the diamond when you play shortstop. So, those things, I just want guys to be more athletic on the mound. We get a lot of guys that play positions and then make the transition to just a pitcher. And one of the biggest things I see like right away is that they get too in a box to be a pitcher. And I want them to be more athletic. So this has been a great time, and it's lent itself to be, explore those different things. And that's been a really fun thing for me. And, I really want to bring that into the fall and what we do, and not get so specific with certain things, and just let them be kids, and have fun, and let their bodies work, more efficiently the way they want to work.
It's funny you say that too, because let them be kids. And I forget sometimes that we're working with 18 to 22-year-old athletes. And I've got a guy that'll come to me and go, Coach, like you said, I'm working on this cutter. And my first response usually is, well, let's just command the 3 pitches we have right now. And then but then it goes back to what Jim just said. It's supposed to be fun, and it's supposed to be on some level, even though ours is pressure packed, that still needs to be there. So I've kind of expanded my capacity for letting guys experiment that way, because it brings that element to it. As long as they stay healthy, we're not doing anything that could obviously hurt arms or get them off their routine or off their program. I've opened my mind and have seen the importance of being able to do that. And I touched a little bit on things about like Rapsodo and the things that are available now. And I'm gonna tell you, I was pretty ignorant for a couple of years. 2 years in a row, I led the country. Our team led the country in ERA. 1 year we were 1. The following year we were number 2 in ERA. So of course, what am I thinking? Well, I don't need a Rapsodo printout. I need to do what I'm doing. And one day it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I said to myself, like, wait a minute. I tell these guys all the time when I'm coaching them, have an open mind, be coachable. I wasn't even being coachable within the game. I was saying, I don't need this stuff. I don't want this stuff. And that's when it hit me. And I started to say, okay, I have to at least, let's explore this stuff and really start to, if not implement it, at least understand it. Because it's going to be, first of all, part of the future. I don't want to be the guy that, I'm not taking shots at Jimmy here. I don't want to be the guy where everyone has an iPhone and I got the Razor. Like I want to, I want to be able to, if my job is to enhance my athletes and make them the best they can be, then I'm probably doing them a disservice, either because of my ego or either because I don't want to. But all that stuff has kind of gone away, and now I'm definitely getting fully entrenched in all these things, and it's great to obviously see that we have all these tools and have it trickle down. It scares me a little bit when I see, a kid at a 13-year-old baseball game whose dad has the Rapsodo out. That's a little bit of a head scratcher to me, but that's going to happen. But I think information's a good thing. And if we can enhance throwing athletes the way we are able to now, there's nothing but positivity that can come from it. And I think it's important for everyone to kind of think that way at this point. And when we do have time off, it's being able to grow still, even though we couldn't be with our teams. And I know, we want to take this final segment and talk about something that is probably the end result of a lot of hard work and a lot of that growth as a player, which is the draft. We talked about it last episode, how it was going to be set up and how it was going to be something different than ever before. Between Jimmy and Alex and myself, we work on the front end of this thing. And Virgil, you're now entrenched on the back end. And what I mean is all the athletes we train have the dream, have the want. They put the work in, and then they get to where you are so you can coach them. So we kind of have the whole thing covered. We talk about the draft. The draft was over in 30 seconds, all right? There was 5 rounds. I watched it on MLB TV over 2 nights, and it was over in 30 seconds, right? There's 5 rounds. You saw a lot of players who were ranked in the top 50 who didn't even get drafted and didn't get a chance. I believe the University of Florida's number 1 pitcher, who was a junior, was ranked, I want to say 20th or 29th in the country, didn't get his name called. And And then there was a multitude of college players that did, and some high school guys sprinkled in. But 5 rounds came and went with a flash, as you guys can imagine. Then the part I really want to speak about, I have personal experience with this. The Wild West of the free agent signing started the Sunday at 9 a.m. after what was the draft on Thursday and Friday. So our center fielder from our program at the University of New Haven, he got a phone call at 9:01 a.m. on Sunday and said, he answered the phone and they said, "This is the St. Louis Cardinals. Are you signing? You have 10 minutes." And he was lucky enough to get the max for the free agent bonus. As the Cardinals were calling him, 2 other organizations got in the mix and were beeping in and texting. So it became almost, like I said, the Wild West of, of this process that was blowing my mind. So I can imagine being on that phone. You don't even know what the other 2 organizations are going to say to you, offer you, whatever the case may be. They're saying, don't sign, texting. If you're on the phone with another organization, don't sign till you talk to me. And to me, it had to be a little overwhelming for the way I see this. And the part I think that probably was the worst, a guy like, and Al, I know you had at least one guy with this similar situation who signed, right? If you're a 6th, 7th, 8th, 10th, 12th, 20th rounder, you didn't get to have that family party. You didn't get to have your name called. You didn't get to see it. Instead, you got a phone call that said, "You have 10 minutes. Are you doing this or not?" And that to me is just the absolute crime of this thing. We talked about all your draft experiences last episode. But my experience with this from a personal end was our guy, like I said, got that call. He was kind of in limbo the whole time, not knowing if he was going to get an opportunity. Scouts were asking for information. He filled out paperwork for every organization, all those things. And in my mind, I'm thinking, man, if he doesn't hear by 6, 7 o'clock at night on Sunday, I'm going to feel for this kid. 9:01 his phone rings. So it worked out great, right? My whole thing was, what do you do when 3 or 4 guys are calling you at once and texting you? And it's not like you can say, "Hey, we're drafting you 3 rounds from now. We need to know." They're telling you, "We need to know right now. Either by the time you hang up or 10 minutes from now, what's going on." I'm lucky he ended up in a great spot. But Al, what was you had one guy sign, or was it more than one?
No, one guy in that after the 5th round free agent signings. Yeah.
What was that experience for him a little similar, or was it different? How did his whole experience turn out?
Yeah, it was similar. He had been talking to the Mets for a while. Long Island kid, actually great story. He was a walk-on. He had no other offers. He came and sat in the office at BC and said, "I want to try out for the team 3 years ago." And we basically were like, "Nobody makes a team. We don't do tryouts." And he said, "Okay, so I'll be there on Monday." And we're like, "We just told you that you can't play." And he goes, "All right, I'll be there. I'll make the team. Don't worry." And we're like, "No, you don't understand." And he showed up, and this kid he did a great job, and he worked his way. I mean, he was hitting 3rd or 4th in our lineup in the ACC, program by his junior year, and he just wouldn't take no for an answer. So I was really
typical Long Island guy, by the way, not taking no for an answer.
Yeah,
right?
Right. And he did a great job. I was really happy for the kid, and we were a little bit worried when the season got cut short, just because he was starting to really, really turn some heads. I think he would have been probably a top 10 rounder. I think he was hitting 415 or 420, when the season ended, and he was really a force to be reckoned with. So I was happy for him. He was really emotional. But we thought it was going to happen. We were just a little bit worried because the whole situation this year. But ultimately, it was the same thing. It was like, "Hey, are you going to sign or not?" And he was going to come back to school, and the whole thing worked out perfect for him. So, and they didn't sign a ton of guys, just in general. They didn't go crazy with that free agent kind of part of the whole thing. So we think he's going to get a chance, and I think he's ready for it.
So, Jim, if you guys working with the athletes you do, were there any of your older guys that didn't get a chance or did get a chance that you want to talk about? I don't know, from if you're in fully entrenched with all the California college guys or not, if they're with you, if they're, maybe past clients, if you want to call them clients, or past Jaeger Sports guys, anybody that sticks out that either on the good side or the bad side, of the draft in those 5 rounds or after?
No stories that I know of. All Jaeger Sports students are typically top 5 round guys or below anyway, so I think it worked out for all of them. They all throw 98. No, I'm just joking. Alan would probably know some stories, but we don't do the camps and clinics that we used to do. So, you know, Alan knows guys through colleges that he's real close with, but I don't know of any stories. I wish I did.
And lastly, Virgil, not to divulge, you know, the Minnesota Twins plans here or anything you can't speak about, but coming from your angle as a pitching coach at the pro level, especially not knowing what's going to come next for these guys, how do you think, how would you attack that as a pitching coach? Will you have any contact with anyone that was drafted? Will you have I assume there'll be some kind of plan laid out eventually. It's probably got to be a little strange knowing you don't know when they need to be ready and when they need to obviously get going. How do you think that is for guys at your level to deal with?
Well, first of all, we have to get to know the players. So they don't come in and we just give them something to do. We get to know them, get to know their pitch plots, the personality, the competitiveness, and then the practicer. But I would this is the first time as a draft that the players got to choose what team they went to. Right, so that's kind of an interesting thing because now as a professional team, we bring how we're going to help you. So, you know, you're like, hey, you have 10 minutes to answer. Well, maybe you don't want to go sign with a team that's like, hey, decide now or we're out. Maybe you want a team that says, hey, take your time. We really want you here. You know, maybe there's that teams out there. So now you get to see teams' personalities kind of come out of and like how they're going to help the player. You know, I know us as the Twins, we've, you know, done some different things to, you know, promote what we do inside of the organization. And, you know, I'm grateful to be a part of this organization because we do a lot of development and we're pretty advanced, I would say, just from, I don't know, I haven't been outside of it, but just from being inside, how much growth we have. And so, you know, if you come with the Twins, so now players are like, I'd like to be with the Yankees, the Twins, the Dodgers, you know, whatever, or I want to be with the Indians. Like maybe you call them, maybe like, hey, I want to play with you, or, you know, so there's this opportunity that's switched. Well, now the organization has to show the player what they're going to do. They don't just pick them. They're just like, oh, you're mine. Now we're going to do what we want. Now there's kind of a relationship building. That's something I saw that developed because we'd have multiple people calling a player to express our want for them and express what we see for them, kind of like something that Alex would do, you know, or something that you would do for a player. So I wouldn't call it recruiting, but you're just, hey, well, this is what we're going to do. This is where we see you. This is where we see you're at. This is, you know, our plan for you for the future or something we'd like for you. And I don't know. I like it kind of in that way too, just kind of deepen those relationships and also show, you know, that the better organizations are now maybe going to get better players, not just the guys with the most money or the different picks.
I think you hit it on the head. I was going to say that it almost became similar to what Alex and I do in terms of recruiting. And I can see organizations, you know, kind of almost putting together, I don't know if this happened or not. I mean, essentially, or even down the road doing this, where you have a shortened draft, you may put together, you know, some type of quote unquote recruiting materials for guys for that reason. And the one thing you hit on that escaped me in the beginning was you do have a little freedom if you're one of those free agent guys. If there are a bunch of teams or multiple teams interested, you do have a little freedom to say, okay, where do I think I might fit in best, and where do I feel comfortable? And you can actually make that decision. Whereas in the draft, you get drafted, they own your rights. It is what it is. So that is a very unique situation that we just went through. And it just it'll be interesting to see. And Alex, you hit it on the head too. Not that many guys got a chance free agent wise. So the numbers, you know, I think there's a lot going on. I think with teams at certain levels going away and the paring down of minor league baseball. But I do think that from a recruiting perspective, they didn't really over recruit. There weren't that many free agent signings.
I feel, not to cut you off, but I feel like, listen, they had to draft guys in 5 rounds, right? That's what it was. But after that, like they could have cut it if they wanted. There was no amount of picks that they had to get. So I feel like if you were picked, that out of all the guys they could have picked, they picked you. Like they saw something in you, they want to work with you, they're going to give you an opportunity. Now that remains to be seen, but to me, it was like, man, if they picked you, they saw something that works for them, and they think that it's going to develop in their organization. So I think it's a really good opportunity for whoever got picked right now.
So, at the end of the day, you guys came on, you spun some positivity my way and enlightened me to look at the whole thing in a positive way, which I appreciate. I had that whole New York thing. You think everything sucks. So to me, it's good to hear these perspectives because again, it was essentially the Wild West and was very different than what we're used to. But I think everything moving forward for us for the time being is going to be not what we're used to. So as I mentioned about myself, you get on board or you don't go anywhere. But at the end of the day, we've had another great episode. We've hopefully brought some new perspective to some people who want to learn about throwing and learn about what we're doing. Jim, we know we can find you at Jager Sports, jagersports.com. Probably that's the only place. You still have a flip phone. So we're going to go right to Revolution Throwing. Alex, Virgil, where can we find you? Where can we find the products? This is always the opportunity to lay it all out there. If we want to find you guys, where can we? Let us know. Al, go ahead.
You can find us revolutionthrowing.com, at Revolution Throwing. I think that's Instagram and also at Twitter, Verge. Am I right? Is it at Revolution Throwing? We're dabbling in Snapchat, so hopefully stay tuned for that, which I think would be cool. I'm trying to figure it out, but we're doing a couple different things. But on the website, we have a number there. Email us, call us. We're just always looking to help.
The safest place to find me is right here. Take It Deep Podcast, obviously the Everyday Throwing Show. Any other place you find me, you may not want to be at. So I would stick to this. We will be back again very shortly for another episode. I thank you guys again for coming on. I feel like we're doing good things in the world of throwing, and we'll keep on doing it. Make sure you come back, folks. We will definitely be back. Stay safe. Let's get right back to as normal as we can. Hopefully we're on the field more days than not moving forward. Take care, everyone. We're going to need you back. We'll be back soon.